Okay, and while we're waiting for more participants to come in, so this is something one of our ADTP alumni has done for her to share her experience in the US. So, yep.
Hi, my name is Dorcas and I'm from ADTP 1804. I'm currently studying in UW Eau Claire, majoring in speech therapy and minoring in psychology. I've been here for about 1 year now and I really like the campus. Firstly, because it's beautiful, so you gotta come here and see it for yourself. Secondly, the tuition fees are pretty affordable and cheap. And thirdly, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for you to join the clubs and societies here. And also the people here are pretty nice and kind because it's a small town, so everything is pretty accessible. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy watching my life in UW Eau Claire. Bye!
All right, so yeah. Once again, thank you all very much for joining our session today. So this is one of the FutureEd series this year. And then for this one, it is in collaboration with ADTP at MCKL. So our title today will be Let's Talk About Speech. So basically we meant let's talk about speech. Okay. So some housekeeping rule. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to just use the Q&A section below whenever you have questions, and then we will get to your questions at the end during the Q&A. All right. Okay, so let's move on. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Kellie Ong, the ADTP Senior Course Advisor at Methodist College Kuala Lumpur. I will be your host and moderator today. Right? And then we have our very own Ms Joey Lim, ADTP alumna. Okay, she's from the August 2016 cohort. She is the Speech Language Pathologist Clinical Fellow at Vancouver Public Schools, Skyview High School in Washington, USA. So yes, Joey is now with us, and I really have to thank her for taking her Friday evening just to share a little bit on SLP with us today. Right? Before I pass the session to Joey, please give me the opportunity to share a little bit about the American Degree Transfer Program, or we can call it ADTP. All right. So I hope that most of you will actually know that American Degree Transfer Program is a tertiary level education. All right. So basically, students who enroll in ADTP, they are already gearing towards their degree. All right. So who are eligible to apply to ADTP? So basically, as long as student completes high school at least year 11 in Malaysia, like IGCSE, O-level, or SPM. Sometimes if you have year 12 education, that will work as well. All right, and then you get admitted to ADTP, so you do about 1 to 2 years here. So it really depends on your major and also maybe potentially which university you plan to go to. And whatever you pay in ADTP is in RM. And then while students are studying in ADTP and getting ready to transfer to the US, all right, they will apply to US universities. And when they get admitted, they will then fly over to the US to complete their studies. So it really depends on each individual. So it may take 2 or 3 years. But on average, a student will complete their undergraduate studies in the undergraduate studies of a total 4 years on average. So these 4 years will include ADTP as well as the time in the US. All right. Here are the entry requirements. So typically the most common ones will be students coming from SPM or IGCSE background. So you need minimum 5 credits. And then there's also ICCE, UEC, and any other qualifications. Do take note that we also have English requirements. So SPM or IGCSE second language, we need a minimum B grade. And as for IGCSE first language English or O-level English, we need a minimum C grade. So since ADTP is very much following the American curriculum, so do expect our courses to be all taught in English. Okay. So what can students experience or experience in ADTP or more about the American tertiary education? So first of all, do know that it is a very flexible program. Okay, so basically for me as a course advisor, I do not stop students from majoring in whatever they want to major in. So sometimes if students can't decide what they want to study, so it's pretty flexible. But I do hope that by end of the first year, student will at least be able to fine tune or at least eliminate what they do not wish to study. Okay, so yeah, so it's really, really flexible. And then it could be in any form as well. For example, like if let's say student wants to have one major and then later on they decided that, oh, I am interested in another field. Like earlier we saw Dorcas video. She is majoring in speech therapy and then minoring in psychology, right? So yeah, so if students want to add on, whether they want to add on minors or additional majors, it's totally doable. Okay, so typically students will just need a minimum one major, and then after that one major, students can just top up. Okay, we've had students who double majored or maybe do one major and three minors. We even had our own alumni graduating with three majors, so triple majors. So yeah, okay. Students will also have to understand that students will be exposed to the holistic environment, holistic curriculum. So no matter what student plans to study, there's a general education requirement that all students will have to fulfill. So in the general education, student can't run away from writing and communication courses, social science, humanities, science, math, arts, and any other specific requirements set by specific universities. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much general where students will be exposed to a lot more different fields apart from what they have already studied now. Okay. And then, yes, there are a wide range of studies for students to choose from. So it could be anything from business to art to theater to music to engineering to speech language pathology, anything at all. So as long as the university offers the major that a student wishes to study, that's good enough. And then finally, students will learn to get used to diverse assessments. So it's no longer just exams. Students will also be exposed to assignments, could be group, could be individual, presentation, also group or individual, quizzes, sometimes in-class participation and stuff like that, right? So it's not just exams. So it's about everything else as well. Okay, so moving on. So what are the US universities students will usually choose? Here are just some of the universities that we have affiliations with, and we do have students who have transferred over. Again, it's just a partial listing, okay? But yeah, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to us, okay? And I would like to take this opportunity to also highlight the exclusive scholarships that we have at ADTP at MCKL. So first one is with our close partner university, Messiah University. Okay, so these exclusive scholarships, the competition is only within ADTP at MCKL. So all these scholarships are only ADTP students are eligible to apply to these exclusive scholarships, yeah? So with Messiah University, the Moy-Phipps Scholarship of Distinction, the recipient will actually get 100% tuition fee waiver. So this kind of scholarship is valid once a year, okay? So I mean, students can apply every year, but there will be only one recipient, okay? And then the next one is with University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, all right? It's the UWEC MCKL Merit Scholarship. So valued at $6,000 per year. Okay, so this is actually the highest tier of scholarship amount an international student will be able to achieve. Okay, but all these will be all the scholarship applications will be done internally in MCKL, and then students will then, the recipient will actually receive the scholarship directly from the universities, either Messiah or UW-Eau Claire, all right? All right, so if you have any more questions about ADTP and MCKL, please feel free to reach out to us through email, or you can also check out our website, or you can call us, or please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. All right? Okay, so without much further ado, let me pass this session on to our speaker today, Ms Joey. So she will talk about speech. And then once again, if you have any questions, please drop your questions at the Q&A section. So now over to you, Joey.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to quickly bring out my presentation slide. All right. Okay, so we're talking about speech today. I'm going to just briefly introduce myself. I know Ms. Kelly has already introduced me. My name is Joey Lim. I am a speech language pathologist clinical fellow, and I currently work at a high school. So I work in an education setting, mostly in special education. And I am currently based in Vancouver, Washington. So that's still in the United States. So this is the overview of the presentation today. I'm going to briefly talk about my education background and then go into the meat of this presentation, which is what is speech language pathology. And these are the areas that I'm going to be talking about. And then I'll try to tie it into what I currently do at the high school and finish it off with technology in the field of speech language pathology. Okay, so a little bit about my education background. I sort of took a different route because my intention was to do college locally. At the time I did SDPM thinking I would go to a public university. At the time I was also a swimming instructor, so that exposed me to working with a child who had a communication disorder. And so that's how I learned about speech language pathology. That really drew me into the field because it combined both science, and I'm so intrigued about the brain and how language processing works, as well as how we produce speech. And it also combined language. So language and science, those were the two things that I really liked. And so I was like really determined to hop aboard and be a speech language pathologist. And so it was through a family friend that I found out about ADTP. And it was also through that family friend that I found out about MCKL. So we didn't really question anything at all. We just went to MCKL, my mom and I, and we registered right away. Ms. Core and Ms. Kelly are just so awesome and so supportive. And I am so grateful for the time I had at MCKL. I think one of the things that was really important to me was like the small, close-knit community. And it's not, and I'm an introvert, so it's not too intimidating to be in that community. You know, it's not intimidating to go into the office and chat with Ms. Kelly or ask Ms. Cora questions. So that was something that I really appreciated. And I also really enjoyed the fact that there's a lot of freedom around the courses that you take. So like I loved taking sociology, word civilization, things that are not exactly related to my field, but gave me like a little bit of, I got to whet my appetite a little bit, in those areas. So that was really fun. And so I did a year of ADTP because with my SDPM, I had credits that I could transfer, and I was really intentional also about looking for a university in the US that would take SDPM credits. So UW-Eau Claire, University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I know some of you are actually studying there right now. Really excited to have future colleagues Yeah, so that was one of the reasons why I picked the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, because of the credit transferability, also because of the scholarship opportunities. And because of that, I got to finish my undergrad at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire in 2 years without spending too much money on room and board, because if you stay on a little longer, you got to spend a little bit more money over there. So that was something I had to really consider. And so I knew that in order to become a speech language pathologist, I had to do my master's as well. So I immediately applied to grad school in my junior year of college. And so I completed my master's at Portland State University. And the reason why I chose Portland State University was because I was very interested in bilingualism and how to support individuals who are from bilingual backgrounds. And so Portland State University had a ton of research labs that provided that support and enabled me to do my master's project around bilingualism. And so that's why I chose Portland State University. I finished grad school in 2 years, which is the general time for you to finish grad school. And during that time, you have 400 clinical practicum hours that you have to complete by the time you graduate. And those practicum hours could be from doing an education setting, practicum, or at a medical setting. So I got a little bit of both of those experiences. And it was mainly through telepractice, so via Zoom. Zoom was my best friend during my 2 years of grad school, because I basically finished my grad school through Zoom. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. And so after finishing out for grad school, now I'm going through a 9-month clinical fellowship program, where I'm a clinical fellow at the high school, and it's 9-month long, where you complete 1,260 hours before you get your licensure. So that's something I'm completing right now. Yeah, okay. So now I'm going into what speech language pathology is. So this is a technical term that I took out of the American Speech Hearing Association website. So speech language pathology is assessing, diagnosing, and treating speech language, social communication, cognitive communication, and swallowing disorders. And I'll talk about those different areas a little later. And the age groups that we work with are basically across the lifespan. So you're going to be working with infants all the way up to adults. And it also depends on which setting you're in. And since I work in the high school setting, I'm working with individuals who are 15 years of age all the way up to their 21, because in the US, you can stay in high school for an additional 4 years before you transition out. Okay, oh, sorry. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we work on in speech. So we've got speech sounds, which is how we make sounds. So right now I'm speaking, and every word that I speak is made up of different sounds combined. So when we're making those sounds, we're using our teeth, our tongue, our lips, our different types of articulators to make those sounds. Like if I want to make the T sound, I'm putting my tongue above the back of my front top teeth, and I'm making that T. Or I need to bring my tongue to the back and make a K. So that's all part of speech sounds. And when we're evaluating speech sounds in younger children, we're looking at whether or not they're developing the sounds at an appropriate age. And these are the different, and I know this is a table that might be a little confusing for some of us, but these are the sounds that we're looking at in a child's speech articulation inventory, when we're trying to assess what kinds of sounds they have and what kinds of sounds that we need to work on. Oh, sorry. And I'm going to talk a little bit about stuttering right now. It is something that's really hard for me to explain. So I'm going to play a video, and I'm also going to do a demonstration.
My name is Daniel. I am 7. I have 7 fish. I like to collect rocks, and I stutter.
Hi, my name is Matthew. I love to play baseball. I have a broken thumb. I love to play with my friends, and I stutter.
Now let's ask a few other kids what stuttering is.
Stuttering is when my words get stuck, like I just did.
Okay. Yeah, so those kiddos really explain stuttering very well. It's when you're getting stuck on a word, your articulators are coming together to try to make a sound, but it's experiencing some tension, and you can see it all throughout your face and your shoulders that there is tension right there. So that's stuttering. And what we work on is not a cure, because you cannot cure stuttering, but we'll work on compensatory strategies on helping a child to move on with their speech. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about voice. And voice refers to how one uses their voice. So right now I'm using my voice to speak, but am I using it correctly? Am I putting too much tension on my larynx, which is where my vocal cords are? And if I'm having difficulty producing a sound like that, that means there might be something going on in there. So we want to go in and take a look and see. And so this is an example of nodules growing on your vocal folds, and that can have an impact on the way you speak or how you're producing a sound. So then we go in and we work on also compensatory strategies, but also rehabilitative ones. So how can we work on vocal hygienes, using our forward focused voice instead of using your putting so much tension over here, or work on vocal function exercises, which are really interesting sounds that you make to help you with that. Yeah. All right. Okay, so what do we work on in language? So language is divided into receptive and expressive. Receptive is reading and listening. How do you take in information when you're reading it? And how do you take in information when you're listening to someone talk? Expressive is writing and speaking. So how do you write a sentence or write a paragraph, or how are you speaking when you're putting words into sentences? So that's all part of language. But language also includes like the social aspect of it. So when you're speaking, you're also thinking about the social expectations of speech. Like, what are you supposed to be talking about in a school setting compared to a setting where you're having a casual conversation with your friend? So that's all part of language too. And these are just some examples. I'm not saying that this is the only thing we work on in language, but these are some examples. Reading comprehension. So you're looking for strategies to understand a passage, read the title, predict what the passage is going to be about. Look at the subheadings. It's going to give you some information as to what kind of information, supporting details that you want to look for. We work on vocabulary, right? How do you connect information together that might be associated? So semantic feature analysis is something that is commonly used for individuals with aphasia, but this is also used for vocabulary and word associations in the school setting. So we're looking at a dog, but there's so much information that we can, or so much characteristics that we can come up with when we're talking about a dog. And so that's what we're trying to create, those connections, so that kiddos can remember what a new word means to them. And then literacy. This is related to reading and spelling words. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we support that. So when we're learning first how to read, we have to learn to first recognize that words are made out of sounds. And so cat is made up of 3 different sounds, k, ah, t. And so these are just like sound plays with kiddos where we're asking them, oh, what happens when you combine p, ah, t together? And they'll tell you pat. Or, they need to learn to recognize that cat begins with the k sound and ends with the t sound. And we know that sounds are associated to letters, and letters make up words. And so then if they know how to read those letters, then they know how to decode those words. And so that helps with both reading and writing. And social communication, this is basically a more layman term for it, I would say, is manners. So when you're in a social setting, how are you expected to behave? Because I have students who would come up to me and say, oh, Ms. Joey, I just farted. And I'm like, that's not really appropriate to say to a teacher. So we work on things like that, or social problem solving when you're in a setting or like you're at a water fountain and there is no cup for you to fill it up with water. You're not just going to stand there and wait for someone to bring it to you. You got to tell someone that you need a cup. And so those are some things we work on in social communication as well, or perspective taking. Especially in conversation, right? We're doing a lot of perspective taking. We're listening to what other people are saying at the same time. We're forming comments that can be related to what the person is saying. We're evaluating if that comment is appropriate for this current conversation or not. And we're also waiting for the right time to respond to their comment. So that's all part of perspective taking in conversation. Okay, and now we're going into feeding and swallowing. Feeding and swallowing is assessing how well so when I'm talking about sucking, is for babies. And for individuals, it's chewing and swallowing food. And so we're looking at the oral cavity and the pharyngeal cavity, pharynx, and also the esophagus when we're evaluating swallowing. We're seeing if food is getting stuck at any parts of our swallowing mechanism. And we're using different types of compensatory strategies or rehabilitative strategies. So a chin tuck and a head turn is very common for individuals who have food stuck on one side of their pharynx. So you move your head to the weak side, so food goes down the strong side, and you make sure food doesn't get stuck on the weak side. So that's just an example of a compensatory strategy. And then we've got over here is the Masako maneuver. And that's basically putting your tongue forward and biting your teeth down on it very lightly, not like really hard. And you're trying to swallow while you're biting it down. And that's supposed to help your base of tongue, because if you know, the base of tongue pushes food down your pharynx. And so that's a rehabilitative strategy. It's to strengthen the muscles of your tongue so that it pushes food properly down your pharynx. We also work on positioning for feeding, because if they're babies who are born with a cleft palate, and that means there's a hole in their palate, that means liquid is gonna leak out of their nose. So we're looking for bottles that are gonna be facilitating the feeding process so that liquid doesn't come out of their nose, or positioning them in a way that that liquid goes all the way down and not up the nose. So that is an example. So now cognitive communication. So this is basically using our frontal lobes, executive functioning. So it refers to difficulty with thinking and how someone uses language. And we know language and cognition is very much interrelated, because when you're trying to talk about a recent vacation that you took, you're going to have to take it out of your memory and try to put it into words. So that's how it's connected. But you're also using attention in a lot of conversations that you have with friends. You're attending to their information and you're trying to come up with a comment. So that's also part of attention. And there's thought organization, planning, sequencing, and other thinking skills. And one thing I like to do with a lot of my students is task initiation, because a lot of them have a hard time starting their assignments or wanting to even finish it. So it's all about imagination, I guess, or, it's a lot of self-talk too. You're really just learning to motivate yourself and monitor how you're doing work. So they're thinking about the task, and they're thinking about all of the things they're going to need to start a task. And they think about whether or not they need assistance or they can do it on their own, and then plan out how much time you need to complete that task before you begin it. So you're really mentally preparing yourself, and then you're executing the task. Okay. And now I am going to talk about the different work settings that we can work at. So SLPs we can work in multiple different settings, and these are just some of the ones that we work at: private practices or physician's office. We work at hospitals, and if you're working at a hospital or a rehabilitation center, you're more likely to work on medical related interventions or assessments. So that's feeding and swallowing and voice. There is a little bit of articulation and language involved too if you're working with individuals who have just suffered TBI or a stroke, or who have cleft palate. You'll work a little bit more on articulation as well. In college universities, you're going to be a professor, so you're training the up and coming speech language pathologists. And at schools, that's where a lot of the language articulation and the social communication is going to be happening. And at schools, we're not going to be evaluating feeding or swallowing, because that's not something that's going to be in our scope of practice in school. So you have to refer to a medical speech language pathologist for that. Okay, and now relating everything to what I do right now at the high school. So then these are just examples of some of the interventions that I'm doing with my kiddos, and it depends, and it's going to be different for a lot of people in the different settings that you're in. It's also different in every school, because I have colleagues that only work on articulation, and that means just producing sounds. And they don't need to worry about social communication or AAC or any other functional communication stuff. So it really depends on the population that you're serving. In my school, I have a lot of students with who are on the autism spectrum disorder. And so we work a lot on social communication. One thing that we always have to work on is problem solving, and it needs to be broken down into steps. Because if you put in a big picture, it's really hard for them to see it. So we need to like pinpoint where the problem is. So we bring up different social scenarios in the school or in the home or in the community setting. And I pinpoint where the problem is. And then we decide, do we need help for this? And that's when we find out, where we, try to look at how big, how small, how medium it is. And for a lot of my kiddos, they like to say that a small problem is a very big problem. And so we have to really, really just like identify the problem and figure out, oh, can I solve this on my own? Oh, it's a pretty small problem. Okay, I don't need help. And that happens all the time. But it's really fun. Yeah. And then I work on AAC as well. This is a high tech, and so AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. So that's using a device or an application on the iPad. It could be on your phone. It could be a voice text to speech application as well. And basically for this one, you're selecting certain symbols that are associated with a word, and you can create sentences out of it. I also do light tech AAC at my school district. So this is a PECS, picture exchange communication system, where the student learns to request for stuff. And so, so here, these are visuals that we create for them. And this student is requesting for help. And this is called a Big Mac. It's basically a little switch. It's not a little switch, it's a big switch, where you record a message. And this message says clap. And so if you're playing an activity or a game that requires a repetitive response, that's a good thing. That's a good sort of mid-tech AAC device to use. So then the kiddo pushes the button, and the voice is produced. So it says clap. And so I do that with some of my kiddos who are learning how to say yes and no, or learning how to say, I need to use the bathroom. So they're learning to ask for permission as well with that little Big Mac. Yeah. And so I wanted to also point out that AAC is not just to replace, it's not just for individuals who are non-speaking, but it's also for individuals who are speaking but choose not to speak. So that's the augmentative part. So I will play a video that, actually it hasn't come yet, so I'll play that video later. And for functional communication, so functional communication is, an example of it is talking about the zones of regulation. This is something I work with a lot with my transition skills classroom. They need to learn how to communicate their emotions. So then they learn how to tell the teacher how they're feeling. I'm feeling angry. Why am I feeling angry? And how can you help me if I'm feeling angry? So those are some things that we work on. And then we have language, which is a lot of vocabulary, reading comprehension. I also work with classroom teachers to sort of help students with their assignments. So then we are front loading on vocabulary for certain classes. Then they go into the classroom and they're ready for classroom instruction. And because they know those words, it's going to help them a lot better to understand classroom content. Okay. And the end goal of speech therapy, at least for in our school, in my setting right now, is to equip students with the skills to interact with their community and advocate for themselves in the right way. And then we also want to equip them with skills and tools to succeed in an unstructured environment. So that's like in the general education classroom. When things are a little bit more unstructured, you're required to interact with your peers in the classroom, do a lot of group work, and there's going to be a lot of unstructured conversations happening there. And then we're also helping kiddos who may not have the motor functions to produce speech and may not have the ability to produce speech. So then we're looking for alternative ways of communicating. I have a student who communicates just by eye blinks, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, all right. Okay, so my responsibilities. So these are just some of the things that I'm required to do apart from providing intervention services. So I have a caseload of 50 students, and I work once per week or twice per week for some, individually or in groups of 2 to 3 for the 25 to 30 minutes. So you're trying to hit a lot of goals in a short amount of time. It's always so hectic, but it's always so fun. And I'm also required to attend IEP meetings, and those are individualized education plan for students who need a little bit more support in school. So then they have goals in reading, writing, math, adaptive behavior, communication. And every year we sit down with the parent and the whole IEP team. So you have a whole team that you're working with, and you're deciding if a goal needs to be continued, discontinued, or a new goal needs to be set. And then I'm also writing daily progress notes because we're required to report to parents every 3 months about how the child is doing. So every time I'm in a session, I have a piece of paper where I'm taking data. And I'm also doing speech and language evaluation. And that's for individuals who have like an evaluation coming up, and we're deciding if they're still eligible for speech or not. Okay, and so I'm going to talk about the field, technology in the field of speech language pathology. And technology and AAC is something that has been really successful and so high-tech AAC devices is what I'll be talking about right now. And this over here is an eye gaze device. So this woman is moving or sort of controlling the monitor with her eye gaze, just with her eyes alone. And so that's an example of a high-tech AAC device. And over here, we have a Prolo Code to Go, which I gave an example about just now. It's symbols made out of words, and you can form sentences with it. And this is a video about using AAC for non-speaking individuals.
My name is Tommy. Dog. Woof, woof. Woof, woof.
My name is Rose. Hand mixer, give. Me. Hand mixer.
My name is Emily. I love it. That was so cool. I love it. That was so cool.
Being nonverbal
Doesn't mean
We can't speak.
we want to show you who we are.
Anywhere and anytime.
My name is Tommy.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I've worked with a lot of students with the Prolo Code to Go. It's a common app that we use in the school district. And it's really neat because you can customize sort of the picture symbols based on what your kiddo is really interested in. So I have a kiddo who's really interested in bus routes. So we've been talking about bus routes, going to different kinds of supermarkets, Walmart, Target. Those are some of her favorite places to go to. And so we use that protocol to go to communicate with each other. And when I am doing an AAC session, I don't speak at all. I just use the AAC device. So it's really fun. And I think the goal is to let kiddos know that you don't need to always have to use your voice to communicate. There are so many other ways to communicate as well. And this next video shows an example of an autistic individual who chooses to communicate with an AC device to supplement his speech. Yes.
Hello, folks. Today I wanted to talk about talking, or more specifically about what it is like to be a part-time AAC user and why I am one. You might have noticed that I usually use a robot voice for my videos, or maybe you didn't notice because it is pretty common for YouTube videos. But I actually use this voice from my tablet in everyday life, which is called AAC. AAC stands for Alternative and Augmented Communication. It is a fancy way of saying not speaking with your mouth. It includes sign language, picture or symbol communication, typing and text-to-speech, eye tracking software, and more. I usually use typing. And then if I want, the device reads what I typed. But why would I use something like this if I can just speak? Isn't this more work? The answer is that it is a trade-off. It is not more work to me, especially on a keyboard where I can type very fast. It does sometimes take a while, but it is worth it to me because if I type in, I can say exactly what I wanted to say. That is not always possible using verbal communication. I am autistic, but I also have anxiety and sensory processing disorder. If I am overwhelmed by either of those, then it is very hard to communicate verbally or maybe even impossible. When I was young and undiagnosed, I had no idea why that was the case. I realized that if I tried to talk in that state, it would not work and it would end badly, so I made sure I didn't talk in those times. When you are 5 or 10, that is fine, but once you get too old, you can't just not talk. People won't accept it and will keep prodding you and threatening you until you say something. So I used to skip school or indicate I lost my voice so people would not try to force me to talk. It worked pretty well, except that I couldn't communicate to anybody during those times, so I couldn't express my needs or wants. A couple of times I tried writing things down to communicate, but usually people didn't accept it at all and would just say, use your words. Use your words, you're not a baby. Babies can't write, but okay, I guess. And my mom also thought pointing was for babies, so I couldn't do that either. When I was in grade 9, I got my first computer and I loved so much how easy it was to message somebody and not worry about stuttering or losing my words mid-sentence or trying to speak but having no noise come out. I got my first phone in grade 12 that I could use to text people, which was also awesome. But being able to text someone doesn't solve the problem of me wanting to communicate with people in the same room. So I still had times where I got really anxious or overwhelmed and could not speak and nobody knew what I wanted to say. But then I found out about AAC. At first I didn't think I was allowed to use it. I thought that you were only allowed to use it if you were physically incapable of any verbal speech. But then after learning more about it from people online and from my occupational therapist, I found out that there is no such rule. I am allowed to use AAC because it is open to anybody who needs it or benefits from it.
Okay. Yeah, so that was just an example of an individual who chooses to use AAC to supplement speech, because sometimes it's really tiring to use your voice to interact with other people, and that is okay. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, and so other types of technology or applications that I've been using in my classroom. Boom Cards is a sort of a website where a lot of speech language pathologists, teachers, occupational therapists, and physical therapists, and that includes teachers, paid teachers as well. They are the ones who create the materials, put it on there, and it saves a lot of time. So I just use that a ton and project on the screen, have my students work through each stimulus item, and it's really fun. Everyday Speech is an app that I use with a lot of my kiddos who are on the autism spectrum. We look at understanding or recognizing different kinds of emotions. We look at sort of problem solving and a lot of perspective taking scenarios, because there are a lot of video modelings there that are really beneficial for especially visual learners. And then Kahoot. I do this for a lot of language and vocabulary sessions. They like competition, and so that's really fun for high school students. And then these are some iPad apps. I don't use any of these because I don't have to work on articulation with high school students. But it's really neat because this one over here shows you where your articulators are supposed to be when you're producing a sound. These are apps that are more so used in a medical setting or in a private practice. It's for individuals who have gone through traumatic brain injury or aphasia or may have dementia. So those are some apps that they were using. And then this is just an example of me and some of my students and my supervisor doing teletherapy last year. Yeah, it was pretty fun. And I think it's really interesting to think about how that increases access to services, especially for a lot of individuals who live in more of the suburban areas or like in the countryside where they have to drive an hour or two to the city to get access to services. Now it's a little bit more accessible to get communication services, but telepractice or teletherapy is one way to provide or increase access to services. And so over the whole pandemic, I was doing Zoom and we did a bunch of stuff over Zoom and it was really fun, including swallowing evaluation. So that was really fun too. Yeah. Okay, and I think that is it for me. Thank you so much. And you can contact me at joeylimsy95@gmail.com if you have any questions. And I will pass the time to Ms. Kellie for the Q&A. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Joey. Wow, it was a real big eye-opener for me as well to learn so much more about SLP, speech language pathology. Okay, so let's head on to Q&A. Okay, actually there's one question, but thank you, Ms. Kerr, for helping us answer. But I think since we do have the time, I will just say out the question, and one will be Joey, that's for you. So maybe you can explain when you mentioned about the settings, like work settings. Okay, so the first question is, what is rehabilitation center?
What is a rehabilitation center? Okay, it's for individuals who are recovering from something. So it could be from an accident, so an example would be traumatic brain injury or aphasia. Aphasia is, this is so hard to explain. It's like a it's so-called language disorder, but it's caused by stroke in the language centers of the brain. So then it impacts understanding and speaking and all that stuff. So a lot of the times these individuals are transitioned from a hospital setting to a rehab center where they get a lot of their rehabilitation services there.
Basically on the road to recovery.
Yes,
right? Okay.
That's right.
All right, I hope that helps you to understand what a rehab center is. Okay, next question. This is also for Joey. Can AAC be used to train dogs?
That's a good question. I don't really know if you could. I think there's no harm trying. I do know that there are individuals who have dogs and they're non-speaking individuals and they can use the AAC to talk to the dog, right? So I don't think there is any I don't want to say yes and I don't want to say no either. I would say maybe.
Gotcha. So maybe it's for the individual to communicate with the dog apart from their facial expression, but they can use the AAC device to help them speak. So be their voice instead. Ah, that's interesting. Okay, nice. Okay, thank you, Joey. Next question, it has already been answered. Let me just take this opportunity to just say it out. Is it necessary to take ADTP for 1 to 2 years before going to the US? Is it possible to apply for scholarship after SPM, take SAT test, and then go to the US right away? All right, it's also a good question. Yes, you can. So be very safe, okay, because depending on your high school qualification, please go check US University's website and then click on International Freshman Application, and then you will be able to see the requirements. If you meet the requirement, then that's great, you can apply. Do note that some universities may need additional qualifications depending on what field you're in and things like that. Okay, yeah, but for ADTP, if let's say you want to understand the American education a little bit more before you go over right away to the US, that's one way. And most people take ADTP to save cost. Okay, because whatever you take in ADTP, you pay in ringgit Malaysia. Okay, and then as soon as you arrive US, you pay everything in US dollar. So that's something for you to think about. All right, so yeah. So another difference is when you apply as a freshman, you need to take the standardized test. So the common one will be SAT, all right? But if you do the American Degree Transfer Program, you'll be applying using your ADTP transcript. So you actually do not need SAT. I was once an ADTP student as well. So I never had to take SAT. I just needed my transcript, my high school results, send it over, and then, yeah, okay? Same goes for Joey and everyone else as well. All right, I hope that answers your question. Okay, more questions. Is using AAC to replace speech really okay? Sometimes my toddler son, who speaks fine, likes to point at things and make humming sounds along with it. Should we try to push him to speak with words or let him be and allow him to use non-verbal language? That's for you, Joey.
That's a very good question. I am not a specialist with toddlers, so I don't want to mislead you. But I do think that nonverbal communication is an important part of communication. If your toddler or if your son is pointing at things and humming to it, I would say you could pair it with your own speech and say, oh, that's a dog. It goes woof woof, you know, just sort of modeling it for him. It's something that you could try. And I know in AAC is used to facilitate speech development in younger children as well. So that is something that you could look into if you're interested in it. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Joey. Next question. Should I do ADTP after A-levels or go straight to the US? Another very good question. Depends on what you plan to major in, and also what subjects you take in A-levels. You may still be able to do ADTP because remember I mentioned about the holistic education. That's a lot more courses that you can take to fulfill requirements here in ADTP before you transfer over. So it's very similar to Joey's case because Joey took STPM, correct? So STPM and A-levels are very similar. Again, depending on what subject you took in A-levels and also your grade in A-levels, you may transfer some credits from there. And then after that, let's see what else you need to take from ADTP before you transfer over to the US. That's also doable. If you have more questions, don't be afraid to reach out to me and I'll be able to assist you further. All right. Next question. May I know if they accept IGCSE student to take speech therapy course? Okay, I'm sorry to ask again because I'm a Malaysian but studying international school year 10. All right, before that, depending which international school you are, assuming you're doing IGCSE, then you need up to year 11. So you have to finish off the IGCSE. The speech therapy course is actually like if you do in ADTP and then you're routing over to the US, you can enter ADTP using IGCSE year 11. Okay, so then you will slowly have to start familiarizing yourself with a speech therapy major, right? Anything else for Joey to add on? Like, how does it help you gear yourself to this major and then now where you are?
As in taking ADTP?
And how does it help you graduate with the Communication Sciences and Disorders major at UW Eau Claire? Yeah, from there. Or maybe you can share like, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question again? So talking about ADTP and how that supported me in finishing up with my undergrad degree
Yes.
at the University of Wisconsin. Okay, that's a very good question. I think it's being an ADTP, you're gonna be exposed to a little bit more of what the American college culture looks like. And I think that's really important, and how professors teach and how you learn through active learning and not really just listening from taking in information from the professor. So and a lot of the things that you learn outside of your major course requirements are pretty applicable to the courses that you're taking in the CSD field, like psychology, social work. Those are some things that you're required to take. And I think what, in my opinion, it would save a lot more time doing ADTP, because you're not having to retake a bunch of courses or sort of retake more or take more courses on top of the courses that you took in, was it IGCSE?
Oh no, IGCSE is like high school. So
oh yeah, okay.
yeah,
Oh,
when they finish
sorry.
IGCSE, they can do ADTP, and then yeah, basically like I mentioned earlier, students can pick any majors, but yes, be sure to finish your high school. Yeah, so at least at the minimum year 11. Okay, right. Thank you, Joey. Next question. Were there any ADTP student entering Ivy League universities so far? At the moment, no. Be a little bit more careful with Ivy League university requirements. Usually, most Ivy Leagues would want to accept freshman applications. So if a student plans to do ADTP and they have a goal to enter Ivy League, most Ivy Leagues may actually require year 12 education. So there are Ivy Leagues that actually consider students' grades in ADTP as part of their high school requirement, although students are already taking tertiary level courses. Yeah, I have students who have applied, but it's really competitive. So students also have backup where they also apply to top tier institutions like University of Minnesota Twin Cities, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, any other universities like Purdue or stuff like that. They do actually get accepted. So we do have had students who applied to Ivy League, but didn't turn out really well. So they have backup plans. So yes, so one good example is University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So when students do ADTP, they're not also wasting time. If let's say their plan A to Ivy Leagues didn't work out, they have plan B where they can still transfer credits over to universities like University of Michigan. Okay, but for Ivy Leagues, be prepared to apply as freshmen to stand a better chance to get admission at the very least. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Oh, so the person was asking for engineering course. Not at the moment, right? Okay, next. If I'm not mistaken, it takes 1 to 2 years to complete ADTP. What decides whether it's 1 to 2 years? Also, do you need a course you want to take SAT, or do you just study yourself for a couple of months? And how long does SAT take? Sorry if I'm asking too much. Okay, so let me just dissect the question. Okay, what decides 1 to 2 years? So it's a good question. So first one will be what kind of major you plan to study. Okay, because some courses, if your major is so specific, you probably don't want to spend too much time in ADTP and then you transfer earlier, like maybe 1 year here and then 3 years there, like fine art. We've had students who did like fine art, like 2D, 3D, digital art. okay? Because all of the major requirements, we don't quite offer it here. So you will have to complete it off in the US, but you can still take other courses here to complement, like the general education. And at the same time, you get to expand your horizon in terms of other fields, because a lot of times when students finish high school, when they do ADTP, they're like, whoa, I've never expected psychology is like that, or sociology, or any other subjects that they might be interested, at the same time fulfilling the holistic requirement. Okay, so the 1 to 2 years is very dependent. And then sometimes if some students financially, they are pretty capable, they can actually go to the US earlier, then they can do it. But most students would actually choose to maximize their credits here so that they will pay, they maximize their credit here so that they reduce their tuition fees when they go to the US. Okay, I hope that answers the question. You need a course if you want to take SAT. Actually, it is pretty much self-study. You don't quite need to, unless you, yeah, there are people who actually have IB prep courses. Like we do have SAT prep courses, but at the moment we don't offer it. But yeah, actually it's self-study is pretty doable. Okay, how long does SAT take? It's really dependent on when you want to register for the test, and then you go take it. But before you take SAT, be sure to prepare for it. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, I think we are actually pretty much on time. Okay, so I hope that by now you have a much clearer idea on what SLP is all about. Thank you very much, Joey, for really taking your time to explain. And yeah, I've learned so much from you. Okay, I hope everyone else did. Also, in line with our FutureEd series, I hope that you have a better idea on how technology has positively impacted speech-language pathology, not just increasing work efficiency for therapists like Joey, but also increases access to services for anyone who needs their service. All right, so thank you all once again for your time. Don't forget, we have our next FutureEd series regarding business analytics in the next month, March. So stay tuned, and I hope everyone have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Thank you, Joey. Have a good day, everybody.